Hey guys, so before we get into our next unit, the first thing that we're going to work on in order to prepare for the PARCC PBA is to focus today on constructed response. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to use a new acronym called ACE, which sounds like something you should have heard in English class, but there's no R at the end. So whenever we're doing constructive responses, this is how I want you guys to think about answering questions. First, the A. Answer in a complete sentence that restates the question. C. Compute. In other words, do the math and show all the work with labels. And E. Explain, I know XYZ because, and without because, it really isn't an explanation. So these are the three letters I want to make sure that we hit every single time we do constructive response from here on out. All right, guys, this is the task that I'm going to walk us through and how we should answer this in ACE every time. Just wanted you guys to see the full thing straight out because I'm going to be working with each piece individually. All right, let's get into it. Okay, let's look at part A. Write a systems of equations that describes the cost of hiring Barry or Martin. Now, remember, I want us to use our framework, ACE. Now, this isn't asking me to explain or anything. It is just asking me to write a systems of equations. So this would end up being a 2-point problem. 1 point for correct equations, 2 points for it being correctly labeled. So let me show you the correct answer and all labeled so you can see exactly what it should look like. All right, guys, so this is my answer. Martin is y equals 50x plus 40, and Barry is y equals 45x plus 50. The reason this is correct is because I answered the question and I computed. However, since it's not asking me for a complete sentence and it's not asking me to explain, so I don't have to do that part. But my equations are clearly labeled. So whenever you're given questions like this, make sure that everything is totally labeled and laid out for your reader. All right, let's go to the next part. All right, guys, this is part B. How much will Martin charge for a job that lasts 5 hours? Show your work or explain how you know. So I have my equation y equals 50x plus 40, and my question is telling me I have the option of either showing my work or explaining how I know. I'm going to show you both sides. If it's asking me to show my work, all I have to do is solve the problem, and then I can answer it. So if it's asking me how much he'll charge for 5 hours, I know that I'm going to plug in 5 for x. And then if I solve this out, which I'm not going to take the time to do, my answer just comes out to $290. Now, if you're just showing your work needs to be super, super organized in congruent steps, just like these were, so you can make sure you get all your points and it's super clear. And then you still have to put this in complete sentence. So let me show you that part. Okay, and if you're just showing your work, this is the last bit. So I showed my work, and then I have this sentence. For 5 hours of work, Martin will make $290. Now, let me show you the other way. Okay, let's look at this exemplar response. Let's see if I hit all of my points. Answer, compute, explain. If Martin works 5 hours, he will make $290. Yes, that answers my question and it restates it. I know this because I substituted in 5 into my equation and solved. Okay, that takes care of my compute part. And now for my explanation. Since x represents my number of hours and y represents the total amount Martin makes, solving my equation results in $290 for 5 hours of work. That answers my explain bit. Not only did I show how I got my answer, but I explained what it means. For 5 hours of work, Martin gets $290. Now, you'll also notice I was really particular in using Martin's name. It's always better to be more specific and use people's names and problems than just saying, if he works 5 hours. It's just more specific. All right, let's move to the next part. Okay, guys, part C is telling us to make a graph that shows how much each of the electricians will charge for service calls of up to 4 hours. So I've gone ahead and I've actually made our graph for us based on using the equations, and then I made tables and that whole thing. I'm not going to go through how I came up with these values. You should be able to do that on your own. There are other things I want to point out. First, you'll notice that I gave my graph a title. If you're given a blank graph, you need to give it a title to make it more official. And you'll notice that I labeled my x-axis hours worked, which we know that's what x represents in our equation, and my y-axis with total earnings. Now, super important that you label your axis and give your graph a title. If you don't, then it doesn't really show whoever's looking at your graph what you're making a graph of. It just shows that you know how to put numbers on some lines. So super important that you make sure that you're labeling everything and being as specific as possible. All right, let's do the very last bit. All right, guys, this last bit is asking us to say, will Martin and Barry ever charge the same amount? Explain your answer. Okay, so what we want to make sure we do with this one is, again, our ACE, or ACE. We want to make sure we answer the question, we want to computate, and then we want to explain it. So there's going to be 3 different parts to this, and I'm going to show you the exemplar so you can see, again, how the best way to go about this framework is. Okay, let's look at this exemplar. Martin and Barry will charge the same amount for 2 hours of work. So that right there, that first sentence is my answer. I know this because I graphed both of my equations and they cross at the point 2, 140. That's going to be our computation. There could have been other ways that we could have arrived at that answer. You could have made a table. You could have plugged values into your equation. You could have graphed them. I chose the graphing method, so that's the one I'm going to explain. And then lastly, since X represents the number of hours worked and Y represents the total amount earned, this point means that after 2 hours of work, the electricians will have earned $140. That last bit is my explanation. If I had left out this bit here at the end, this question, which probably would be maybe at least 3 points, would probably only have gotten 1, maybe 2 points, just for stating the answer and the computation. If you do not explain, you won't get full credit. All right, guys, today we're going to go through old tasks from phase 1 and redo them based on our new ACE framework. So let's go ahead and get started.